4th, 2018 meeting, Winter Planning Commission will now come to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Gail Schick,
Present.
Doug Dennison,
Present.
Jerry Bushelman,
Here.
Victor Talon,
Present.
Charles Schinner,
Here.
Dan Foreman,
Present.
Tim Annable,
Here.
Town Board Liaison Ken Bennett.
Here.
First item on tonight's agenda is review of the agenda itself by the Planning Commission for any addition of items or new business to be added to the agenda.
Move to approve as written. Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Annable, second by Commissioner Foreman, that we approve the agenda as presented. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes. Those opposed will vote no. Motion carried unanimously. Next item is public invited to be heard. If there is anyone in the audience who has an item that they wish to present to the commission tonight that is not on our agenda this evening, now is the time to do so. And if you do have something that you want to present, come up to the podium. You'll have a 3-minute time limit to do so. And there's a red, yellow, green light indicator on the podium to tell you how much time you have, and if there's 30 seconds left, you will get the yellow light. And if there's anybody, now would be the time to come up and present your piece. Seeing there be none, we'll move to the next item, which is the consent calendar. This evening's consent calendar consists of the approval of the minutes of the March 21st, 2018 meeting.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the minutes of the March 21st, 2018 meeting.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Bushelman, that we approve the minutes of the March 21st, 2018 meeting. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes. Those opposed will vote no. Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to board action item. First item this evening is a recommendation to the town board for final site plan, Eagle Crossing subdivision for filing lots 1 and 3. Paul, the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Planning Commissioners. This final site plan before you tonight is for a multifamily development that was previously rezoned from limited industrial to multifamily MF2 in January of this year. The site plan has been reviewed in accordance with Article 4, Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code. The subject property is located between Highland Meadows Parkway and Fairgrounds Avenue. And again, the current zoning is MF2 multifamily. The site plan characteristics include a total of 407 lots. There are a number of buildings, including 4 2-story multifamily buildings on the east side here. And those have between 14 and 16 units apiece. There are 15 3-story multifamily buildings that have between 21 and 22 units, 24 units each. 620 parking spaces are provided, including 128 in garage facilities, and the remaining as open air parking. 21% of the footprint is covered by building site, 46% landscaped area. Amenities include a clubhouse for residents, a pool, a playground, as well as a trail, soft surface trail being built adjacent to this drainage facility. And in a little greater detail, you can see landscape proposed, which is in compliance with the landscape standards. And clubhouse elevations and some of the different building elevations. The buildings feature horizontal lap siding as a predominant facade material, as well as a stone treatment along the stairways and the base of the buildings. There are covered decks and porches provided, and 512 roof pitch with varying roof forms. There are other off-site improvements associated with the development, including the construction of Steeplechase Drive, connecting Highland Meadows Parkway to Fairgrounds Avenue. There will also be a 10-foot wide public trail along Steeplechase and the regional detention facility I mentioned a moment ago to the north. And additional building elevations, can run through those quickly. The application is consistent with the following goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. Chapter 5B, the growth framework goal, to maintain the character of the community while accommodating future growth that is fiscally and environmentally responsible. And the staff comment analysis on that is the proposal does respect the character of the area through siting of the project over 600 feet away from the closest single-family homes, and by limiting the easternmost buildings to 2 stories in height. There is one area staff has identified as a potential concern, which is in regard to the parking provided and its impact on community character. Staff is concerned the parking provided may be insufficient to accommodate the parking demand on the development. And should parking prove to be insufficient, people will likely park in fire lanes or bike lanes on the adjacent Steeplechase Drive, creating potential safety concerns. This project is unique to Windsor in both its size and scale. The 400 plus units is the largest development, multifamily development the town has seen. Previously, the largest was the 196 units proposed with the South Hill development that's under construction now. The location is also unique in that there's no off-street parking to accommodate any overflow parking, which most projects, many projects do have. Steeplechase Drive is a major collector, not built to accommodate any on-street parking. So any parking would again result in potential hazards. Additionally, the lack of services and employment in the area would mean most residents would likely be relying on cars to reach those services and jobs. While the site plan meets the minimum 1.5 parking spaces per multifamily unit, it does not provide any designated visitor parking. The proposed 407 units that the code requires results in a required parking total of 611 units. And the numbers on this slide are slightly off in that the units were updated recently, but it is 407 units and 611 parking spaces required. They are providing 620 parking spaces. For reference, the South Hill development mentioned earlier that has 196 units was required to provide 294 spaces and is actually providing 335 to accommodate for both visitors and residents, as well as overflow. As the first development of its size in Windsor, it's become apparent the municipal code insufficiently addresses developments of this type and size. So staff will be working to update the code as that project moves forward with the consultant. The applicant did volunteer that this product has been built in other northern Colorado communities and could be looked at as an example for parking, how the parking functions there. Creekview Apartments in Greeley is one such example, and staff did visit that on a Saturday morning recently to get a feel for the parking situation there. They have 348 units. The parking ratio is 1.86 for that, compared to the 1.5 or so that's being provided with the Windsor project. It was observed that the parking did appear sufficient in that case, but again, it's provided at a higher ratio. And that apartment complex is approximately 100% occupied, according to the management company. There is also on-street parking adjacent to that development with around 115 on-street spaces available, and around half of those, a little less than half of those, appear to be occupied mostly by residents of the multifamily development. Further point of reference is the parking generation manual prepared by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and they recommend 1.94 spaces per unit for the 85th percentile, meaning that 85% of projects of this type would be appropriately, parking demand would be met at 1.94 spaces per unit. Additionally, during the public hearing for the rezoning, there were a number of property owners who voiced concerns about the development, including potential decreased property values of surrounding homes, overall concern about too much density, and possibly the negative impact on quality of life. A shortage of parking would likely impact those concerns or contribute to those concerns. The parking concerns outlined just now have been shared with the applicant. They've decided not to provide any additional parking or to reduce the number of units. Despite these concerns of staff, it is acknowledged that the minimum parking demand is met with this project as outlined in the municipal code. So staff is compelled to recommend approval of the site plan given that that is met. Should parking prove to be insufficient, it will ultimately be the responsibility of the landowner to ensure parking is not occurring in unauthorized places like fire lanes that are creating hazards. There is one major factor that could potentially mitigate some of any parking concerns, in that there are numerous undeveloped properties surrounding this one, so the property owner would have the potential to acquire more property or otherwise provide parking nearby or adjacent to the site if that proves necessary. Moving on, Chapter 5B, the growth framework. Objective 1, prioritize new growth in areas currently served by town infrastructure and services. This developer will be responsible for extending Steeplechase Drive and other roads to serve this development, as well as extending water and sewer services, which are provided by the Fort Collins Loveland Water District and South Fort Collins Sanitation District. Finally, Chapter 5C, the goal of diverse housing and housing types, as well as the high density close to commercial centers. All those concepts are supported by this development, as the multifamily housing would provide greater housing opportunity for residents and is located in close proximity to the proposed Brands East commercial development. With that, staff recommends the Planning Commission forward to Town Board a recommendation of approval, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, all outstanding staff comments on the site plan drawings shall be addressed. Number 2, prior to building permits being accepted for review, the applicant shall A, enter into a development agreement with the town, which shall not be recorded until after the Eagle Crossing subdivision 4th filing plat has been recorded. B, submit a minor subdivision application to place the portion of the regional detention facility depicted on Lot 1 in the Eagle Crossing subdivision 4th filing in a separate tract. C, present evidence to the town that an easement granting temporary rights to the developer to construct the off-site improvements depicted on the improvement drawings and permanent exclusive rights to the town for the storm drainage facility. And D, present a written undertaking under which the Raindance Metropolitan District will permanently assure the ongoing maintenance of the drainage facilities, adjacent recreational trail, and surrounding landscaping on Tract A of Fossil Ridge subdivision 2nd filing and yet to be created tract in the condition of 2B above. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: application and supplemental materials, staff memo and supporting documents, and the recommendation. The applicant and representatives are here, and they do have a presentation they'd like to share with you, unless you have any immediate questions for me.
Okay, we'll go ahead and listen to their presentation first.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Brian Williamson. I'm with TSC Consulting Engineers, and we are the planner and engineer for the project. I just have a short presentation. Paul did a very good job covering the details of it. I know that you have a long agenda tonight, so I don't want to belabor any of those points. This is a rendering of the site plan located, as Paul described, at the intersection of Ward and Steeplechase. The 4 buildings that are to the east of Ward Road are the 2-story, and then the 15 buildings that are located to the west of Ward Road are the 3-story. Again, it's a 407 units with a unit mix between 14 and 16 for the 2 stories and 21 and 24 units for the 3-story buildings. Excuse me, Paul did go through the parking statistics. We do have 120 spaces that are in parking garages and then 500 surface spaces totaling the 520 that Paul mentioned. Again, the town standard is 1.5 parking spaces per unit, and that would translate to 611. Sorry to be rehashing these from Paul's presentation. But what I wanted to touch on is that the parking reduction from the preliminary plan to this was driven mainly by a building spacing issue. We had, at the preliminary plan, 20 feet separating all of our buildings, and that met all of the building codes for those buildings. We did a more in-depth analysis of those, and the penetrations that are on the sides of those buildings, the number of windows and the patios required a 30-foot spacing in between those buildings. So all of those buildings kind of shifted and got a little more dispersed throughout the site, which in case in point, removed some of our parking from the project. So we're not trying to, it's not our goal to underpark this project, but we tried to fit as many parking spaces in as possible. We've actually worked with staff back and forth and added more parking spaces back, taking some other landscape areas out of the project to kind of get up to that 620 total. So, really we're meeting the standard set forth in the land use code, and we're not removing parking for any reason aside from we're just trying to make this site work as best as possible. One thing I did want to focus on is the project amenities. Paul mentioned that there is a pool and clubhouse that would be for the residents. There is a large playground that'll have a large play structure for ages 5 to 12, climbing boulders, swings, a seesaw, and a net climber. And then there is the regional trail connection along Steeplechase that will be built with Steeplechase, and then that all will extend into the Brands. This is really the first piece coming before you of this Brands development, and all of these rooftops will drive a lot of that commercial that's going to be happening in the future. And then we did add a natural walking trail in the detention pond. There'll be a soft surface trail, and hopefully that will eventually connect to the Brands and then all the way over to the ranch. These are just some examples of the playground equipment, and then I have the same elevations that Paul presented in his project. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have or concerns.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. Any questions, comments from the commission?
How many parking spaces did you lose when you had to redesign the spacing?
We lost 25 spaces. So the original plan had 645, we now have 620.
Joe?
Steeplechase, what's the, how many lanes is that?
Steeplechase would be one through lane in each direction and a center turn lane.
With bike lanes as well.
And you got some units on the south side there.
That's
How
correct.
do they get across to the playground?
There is a, right here, there is a pedestrian refuge island for them to cross. So there'll be like a midpoint. So since there's no, oh, I'm sorry, it's actually a Ward Road. It's this intersection right here. It's this little black dot you can see in the plan there. Since there's no turn to the north there, we're using the center turn lane as a pedestrian refuge area, so they'll be able to cross one lane, have a pause, and wait across to the other lane. They won't have to wait for both areas to be clear.
And so what would discourage people from crossing at any other point?
Well, I mean, that will be the striped crosswalk. I think anything else would be considered.
And you always use the crosswalk?
I don't, but I do always look both ways.
Okay.
He does starting tonight.
Victor?
Did we ever get a complete traffic study on this? Because I know when we were talking about this prior to that, we needed to have a traffic study on it. What was the results of that?
Yeah, there was a traffic study done with the overall Brands development proposal, and this proposal is in conformance with that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'd like to mention is that that traffic proposal noted that the majority of the traffic will be going either to the east or to the south because of the light that's existing at Ward, rather than coming out to Steeplechase and Highland Meadows Parkway.
I have great concerns about the parking. I guess a question to staff, how has the 1.5 worked out in previous developments in the city?
I don't know if Scott has more experience observing some parking, but I think it's worked okay, with the caveat that there's been generally on-street parking available as overflow.
Yeah, I guess I would say that Windsor is just in the last couple of years seeing the first wave of multifamily projects that really are in the town's history. This is probably the biggest scale one we've seen so far, but the recent projects that Paul mentioned in South Hill, they met the 1.5 parking spaces per unit, but they also provided some overflow for guests and visitors. So, and like Paul said, most of the multifamily projects, the others that we have existing in town, are adjacent to public streets that do have public parking on the street as well. So it's a little bit of a unique situation here.
Are we tied into accepting the parking as it is since it meets the code?
That's why staff is recommending approval based on the fact that it does meet minimum code, but we're also pointing out those concerns, and we've tried to address those concerns between staff and the applicant, and there's been some reluctance to, obviously, their business model has a certain number of units in it and a certain number of parking stalls, and so we're pointing this out for the Planning Commission and Town Board to essentially break the tie between staff and the applicant.
In my past, I've lived in apartments that have not had enough parking spaces. And you come home from work and you have nowhere to park. As far as them and as far as the community, if they don't park there, they're gonna find somewhere to park, and I don't know if that's gonna be safe or what's going on, so.
I guess I have a question for the applicant. If it is a situation where there isn't enough parking spaces, what would you be able to do?
Good evening, Morgan Kidder with Fossil Ridge Holdings LLC. It's hard to say what we would do at that point. Obviously, if there is a parking issue at that point in time, we would have to take a look at that, but that is an if. We have a project in Firestone that has 1.5 spaces required per code. We do not have a parking issue there. It's the same size project. It's 405 units.
Do you have off-street parking capabilities there?
We do not.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of have the same concerns that Jerry has. And wondering if we get to that point, if there would be something that yourself will be able to come back and possibly address, so. But you're meeting code, and I guess that's one thing we have to take a look at is our code up to date where it needs to be, and address that, so. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Charles?
Question to the applicant, what's your mix of bedrooms on this unit complex?
Off the top of my head, I do not have that.
2-bedroom, 1-bed, these are all 1-bedrooms, or?
There's a mixture of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom in would be the 14 and 21 plex. And then there's 1, 2, and 3-bedroom in the 24 and 16 plexes.
Okay.
And Brian, mixture of those buildings.
It's a very few number of 3 bedrooms, I think. There's probably 1 per floor on the 21 plexes. So I think we've got 3 times. There's probably 16 or 18 units that are 3 bedrooms. The rest is a pretty even split between 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom.
Okay. So this is meant to be market rate rent?
Correct.
So you'd expect some roommate situations?
That I can't
It's hard to say. What's your, in your Firestone unit, what's your occupancy rate?
Occupancy rate is, I don't have the exact figures, but it's in the 90s, that I do know.
North of 90%. So pretty full,
Yes, sir.
basically. And kind of same mixture of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms.
Yes.
So I share the same concern about parking. I share the concern about safety with this other group across the street. I have a concern about traffic flow in and out of this area with that high of a density of units. How does it get to a major artery like Crossroads? So that's,
Any other questions,
that's my
comments?
initial concern.
Okay, thanks, Charles.
Is there gonna be a stoplight at the, Ward on Steeplechase?
At Ward and Steeplechase, Paul, no.
Yeah, there's one currently at, no, I'm sorry, at
Ward and
Crossroads.
Crossroads.
Yeah, not at Steeplechase, no.
Didn't anticipate that. That would help some with the safety concerns of crossing.
Any other comments?
Paul, when you mentioned, that if there did turn out to be parking problems, the applicant would have to address that, does the city have any recourse whatsoever? I mean, obviously they can, if someone's parking in the fire lane, that car would be ticketed, but does the city have any recourse with the applicant or developer to enforce that? They'll have to come back and take care of it later.
I don't think there is a good mechanism to force them to come into compliance other than, like you said, kind of parking tickets and things like that.
Right.
I don't know.
Although staff did recommend that possibly language could be incorporated into the development agreement associated with the site plan. However, that was another item that we weren't able to come to agreement, but that is something that the town board, or the planning commission and town board could probably consider in a condition of approval. I don't have any language crafted for that,
Okay.
so.
I'm in agreement with staff that there's a likelihood that there'd be parking in the fire lanes and cause safety issues, and obviously we need to address the code if we're gonna have more of these kind of projects coming through, but I think it's a safety concern to try and pack this many in there without any on-street parking and just barely squeaking over the code limit of parking without any other alternatives.
Charles?
Paul, are the parking spaces of a standard size?
They are all standard.
And so an F-150 could fit in there, and 3 F-150s side by side and be able to get in and out of them, not these little tiny spaces that sometimes you run into.
Yeah, standard parking stalls 9 feet wide, and all the spaces are required to meet that 9 feet.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments, questions? Personally, I think I would like to see some type of statement in the development agreement with the applicant to address the issue with future parking so that it can have a little bit of teeth into it and be able to have something to go back on, so.
I agree.
So, I think that should be one of the conditions of approval.
Just one rather technical thing. On the conditions of approval, we just want to modify it to say the Brands East Metropolitan District will take the maintenance of that pond, not the Rain Dance Metropolitan District, so we have the right district in that condition.
Did you have a comment?
We got people had a hearing on this.
Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Chair, I move the planning commission forward to the town board recommendation of approval with the following conditions, adding a condition, number F, that we have a parking condition in there if we find that we fall into a situation where there's not enough parking.
been moved by Commissioner Towns, second by Commissioner Dennison, that we forward a recommendation of approval to the town board, subject to the conditions that were listed, and to add an additional condition to some verbiage in the development agreement to address future parking concerns with the developer. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes, and those opposed vote no.
Mr. Chair, did that include the change to Brands East Metro District?
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Bushelman?
And motion carries 5-2. Moving on to the next item, we will close our regular meeting, open up a public hearing for annexation petition to annex zone certain property known as Weld County Road 76, annexation to the town of Windsor. Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The annexation proposal before you tonight is for 6.47 acres to propose to be zoned general commercial and residential mixed use. It's been reviewed in accordance with Article 1, Chapter 15 regarding annexations. The annexation is consistent, the zoning proposed is consistent with the property to the south. The purpose of this annexation is to annex the Weld County Road 76 right-of-way. And this is in anticipation of the proposed Rocky Mountain Sports Park and possible improvements to that roadway with that development. There was a neighborhood meeting held in February of this year, and a summary is included in your packet materials. The town board did pass a resolution declaring that certain findings of fact for the annexation had been found in substantial compliance with the Colorado Municipal Annexation Act of 1965. The public hearing dates are April 4th, tonight, and April 9th for town board. The notification was sent out in accordance with municipal code requirements. And staff recommends that Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval of the annexation to town board as presented. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: application and supplemental materials, staff memo and supporting documents, all testimony presented, and the recommendation. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Since this is the public hearing portion of the process, is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on this agenda item or have any concerns that they wish to address with the commission?
Hi, good evening, Board. My name's Rosalind Leoto. The address is 36933 County Road 15, Windsor, Colorado. And I don't know if you could pull up the site map again or the location area, but one thing when this annexation project goes through for the sports park and everything, one thing you need to take into account that you will be given to you when you get a hold of this property. If you go from County Road 15 and 76 and go directly east a mile to 257 and 76, so that entire mile stretch where you're wanting to make all these improvements for the sports park, what you're going to inherit along with the sports park is you're going to have a three-way intersection at County Road 15 and 76, another three-way intersection at Northwest Estates in 76, a three-way intersection where the soccer fields would be in 76, a three-way intersection where Rocky Mountain Sports Park in 76, and then also a three-way intersection at Highway 257 in 76. And in addition to that, you will have 7 private driveways, all in that mile of road. So that's all coming your way with knowing that this annexation, if it goes through, you'll have to deal with the safety issues. What is that? 5 three-way intersections and 7 driveways. In addition, people walk and they bike, they ride their horses. And the other aspect you have, given the road, it's not a subdivision where all the kids can go to one area for a bus stop. If the bus has to stop in front of someone's house, that's where they stop. And right now, there's even just the logistics and the safety of the road, because more and more people are using it at the intersection of Northwest Estates and 76. The bus is actually, one stops here, one stops here, and they time it so that they block traffic, so it's safe for the kids. So already the school bus system has had to, they just kind of block the road for the safety of the kids because of the way it was laid out up there. It's not a good layout, but that's what you have to deal with. And so anyway, I just wanted to give you my thoughts on that that's the way the road is, and it's getting to be more and more used by commuters and everything. And that's a lot of three-way intersections and a lot of driveways to be part of a project. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Rosalind. Anyone else have a comment?
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
And moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Bushman, that would close the public hearing. Those in favor of the motion, vote yes. Those opposed, vote no. And motion carries unanimously. We will reconvene our regular meeting, open up the regular meeting, moving on to the next item, which is a recommendation to the town board for the annexation petition to annex and zone certain property known as Wild County Road 76. Paul, you have anything further?
Nothing further, although I do want to point out that those slides somehow got mixed up. So if you happen to be looking at those previously, they were not quite in the right location. So just to orient you on the plat here is 257, and this is 76 with County Road 15 being further over here. And that's all.
Mr. Chair.
Comments, questions? Yes, Doug.
So Paul, does this annexation cover that entire distance from 257 to County Road 15?
There's a portion of it that's already in Windsor.
Okay.
So with this annexation, the entire stretch will be in Windsor.
Okay, and what about to the west of 15 on 76? Is that already annexed in?
I'm not sure. Is the
76 west of 15. I don't believe the stretch adjacent to, is it Roth Estates or Alex? I don't believe the stretch that's adjacent to Roth Estates is in, but then the next half mile over County
The
Line Road
Ridges.
is in.
Okay.
Jerry?
The items that Rosalind referred to, three-way intersections, are those currently existing?
those all exist, yes.
Charles?
Is this a currently paved road?
It's a chip seal road, so it's would have to be improved if the sports park goes through as it's been presented.
And so what's the right of way width that you're talking about for this road?
The additional right of way would likely need to be acquired to build a full section road. So that
So
would-
it's not just this annexation, it's something else beyond it to make it a real road correct width.
there could be potential on the north side where they would, right away might have to be acquired, and on the south side with the sports park where they would have to dedicate right away.
Any other questions, comments?
One more. So with this annexation, are we just annexing the right-of-way that Weld County currently has for the road?
Correct,
So the
yeah.
30 or 60 feet or whatever their right-of-way is?
Yes.
Okay.
Other comments, questions?
If for some reason the sports park doesn't go through or get built, then the city's just picked up some extra road to maintain?
Yeah.
Correct, yes.
Mr. Chair, I move that we forward to the town board a recommendation of approval of the Wall County Road 76 annexation on the general commercial and residential mixed-use zoning designation as presented.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Bushelman, that we forward a recommendation of approval to the town board of the Well County Road 76 annexation and general commercial and residential mixed-use zoning designation as presented. Those in favor, vote yes. Those opposed, vote no. Motion carries 6-1. Moving on to the next item, which is a site plan presentation for River Valley Crossing subdivision, second filing, lot 1. Paul?
The site plan presentation, or excuse me, the site plan has been reviewed in accordance with Article 9, Chapter 17. The property is located at the southeast corner of Main Street and 17th Street. The overall development characteristics, it is a 1.1 acre property. Proposed is a 2-story building with a 7,700 square foot lot coverage, approximately 28% landscaping, and 72 parking stalls. Site is zoned general commercial, and the site plan itself with the building closest to the corner, parking wrapping around the other sides. And landscaping plan as well. The building elevations, primary materials include brick and stucco with some accent metal panels. The predominant roof height is 31 feet and includes a roof feature of up to 37 feet. The next agenda item is a height waiver for this particular item. As you're aware, this is a presentation for your informational purposes, and should you have any comments, questions, please pass those on to staff at this time. The proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan, as well as the strategic plan. Do want to note the applicant is here, should there be any questions? Otherwise, that's all I have.
Paul? Comments, questions from the board? Charles?
Just for point of clarification, what's of the elevations face 257?
It would be the east elevation, or sorry, the west elevation would face 392 as you're coming into town.
392, okay.
The north elevation would be adjacent to Main Street.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? Okay. Guess that's all we'll need on that one, since we don't have any recommendation to give on that. Moving on to the next item, which is commercial corridor plan waiver requested. Section 3B2A, River Valley Crossing subdivision, second filing, lot 1. Paul?
This waiver request is from commercial corridor plan height restriction. The corridor plan does outline the requirements for waivers, which shall be determined by Planning Commission. Again, the site at 17th and Main with the general commercial zoning, and this site plan showing the building location. The commercial corridor plan states that the predominant portion of any building shall not exceed 30 feet in height. The maximum building height proposed in this, with this development is a little over 37 feet to allow for the 2-story medical office building. The applicant has indicated medical office facility does require a little extra height between floors for additional medical equipment. As mentioned in the previous presentation, it's the staff's interpretation that the predominant roof height is 31 feet, which is I think it's shown best in these perspectives. So looking at the roof line here is just 1 foot over what the commercial corridor plan requires. The criteria outlined by the commercial corridor plan states that the strict application of the applicable standard will result in either extraordinary practical difficulties or undue hardship. As I mentioned a moment ago, the a little extra height is required with the medical facilities as indicated in the application materials. The traditional height being 14 feet for 1 story with additional height needed for screening and things of that nature. Corridor plan also states the proposed waiver, if approved, will protect the public interest equally or better than the standard for which the waiver is requested. They have requested a height up to 32 feet, should there be any design changes needed as they finalize the drawings for this project. And it's viewed as a nominal increase over the 30-foot, and any increase in shadows would be very minimal. Corridor plan also states approval of the waiver request will not be detrimental to the public interest, which we have not determined any negative impact in that regard. The proposal would also meet the comprehensive plan goal of maintaining the community character, as well as the strategic plan. Staff recommends the Planning Commission approve the waiver request with the following findings of fact. Number 1, strict application of the applicable standard will result in a practical difficulty. Number 2, the proposed waiver will protect the public interest equally or better than the standard for which the waiver is requested. And number 3, approval of the waiver request will not be detrimental to the public interest. Finally, staff requests the following be entered into the record: application, supplemental materials, staff memo, supporting documents, and recommendation. The applicant does have a brief presentation as well, so I'll pull that up for them.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Katie Thompson with Ripley Design, and I'm here on behalf of Associates of Family Medicine to present the waiver. And I'll try not to go over too many points that Paul touched on, but just to clarify some of the height requirements for a medical office building.
Katie, could we get your address also for the records?
I'm sorry?
Could we get your address for the records?
The address is 1683 Main Street.
Okay, thank you.
So this image here shows a cross-section of the building, sliced north to south. And the reason that a 30-foot building height is impractical for any medical office building over 1 story starts with the typical floor-to-floor building height for a medical office building is typically around 14 feet from finished floor to finished floor. From this, about 2.5 feet is taken up from the structure, slab, ceiling thickness located between the 2 floors. Then with an interior ceiling height just over 9 feet to provide a comfortable treatment room for patients and practitioners, we're left with about 2 feet for mechanical delivery and return system, sprinkler distribution, and lighting. And we feel that this 2 feet is appropriate and needed in order to allow flexibility in the future for as medical equipment is advanced. We found that in some older medical office buildings, it can be a little difficult to upgrade equipment due to this lack of space. And then finally, above the roof deck, the parapet height must be a little bit higher to account for the positive slope for the roof to drain, while maintaining that consistent parapet height around the perimeter of the building. Just to touch on the second item that the commercial corridor plan requires of waivers, the proposed waiver, if approved, will protect the public interest equally or better than the standard for which the waiver is requested. We believe the urgent care facilities are underserved in the community right now. They're there aren't any other in this area. So we believe the intended use would certainly fill an important need for the community. In addition, the approval of this waiver will allow for both a more efficiently functioning and aesthetically pleasing building to enhance the surrounding neighborhood. We've also created a shadow study to point out different times of the year how the shadows impact the areas around the site. So the left side, June 21st, shows the shortest day of the year, the longest day of the year, shortest shadows. A little confusing there. So as you can see, for perspective here, it's a pretty minimal impact in June. Then December 21st is winter solstice, and this is kind of a worst case scenario for shadows. The shadows here, while they do extend into Main and 17th Street, they also stay completely outside of the adjacent property to the east. Their drive aisles and the building itself. And then we've included some blow-ups to the right. The thick line that's shown on these blow-ups indicates where the shadow would end should the predominant portion of the building be reduced to the 30 feet required by code. So as you can see in the top right image, that's shown at 3 p.m. on December 21st, and the additional shadow that's created by going from 30 feet to 31 feet is about 18 feet by a little over 4 feet of additional shadow for that time of day. And then the lower image shows at 9 a.m. on the 21st. That gives you about 21 feet by 3 feet of additional shadow along 17th to the west of the property, and approximately 30 feet by 4 feet to the north along Main Street. The proposed building that we're presenting is anticipated to be an asset to the community. We don't anticipate the additional height to pose any disadvantage to the community. Questions?
Comments, questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair, just a comment. I just want to say I appreciate the depth at which you just went through the rationale there. It's so frequent that we get waiver requests that really don't bring a case, and I just appreciate you guys doing your homework and bringing a set of facts for us to consider.
Absolutely.
I echo the same sentiments. That was a good information to have. Any other comments, questions? Charles?
Again, I echo those comments on your simulations. I'm not too concerned about shadows on this corner because it's a street. There's not high pedestrian traffic here. I do have a question to staff. Where do you measure from? What's your datum? You know, so we don't get into this, well, I thought it was going to be measured from this point on the ground. Where on the ground is foot zero is an agreed upon spot for that datum, for that measurement vertically?
Yeah, it's measured from the adjacent finished grade.
So adjacent finished grade as it exists today?
No, as it's completed.
So is there a datum point put on the ground so that you can measure from? Or is it just dirt? You can move around, okay, scrape off a little bit dirt, we can get the height to where it needs to be. You see what I'm coming from is that oftentimes in this, you might shift, I mean, that's why they're asking for 32 feet. It shifts 6 inches. I don't want to have it to come back and, we're 2 inches above the 32 feet, come back and talk about this again. If there's a datum, a fixed datum that exists today that they measure from, that would like annihilate any other further discussion. Everybody's in agreement, yeah, we're going to measure from this point.
It'll be measured from the finished grade on the grading plan. So whatever the finished grade on the
So you
grading
can just
plan is.
add some more dirt in there if it's too tall.
Well, the site has to drain, so obviously engineering reviews the grading plan, and once that's approved, the building height will be
Okay.
measured from that.
If that
grade.
works for y'all,
Mhm.
I wouldn't do it that way, but I'm not a planner, so.
Follow up on that. Okay, Shannon? I'd like to follow up on that. So I mean, if they do mounding all the way around it, they can gain 2 or 3 feet height?
I-
I mean, probably first
That's
floor
not what's
finish,
pro-
wouldn't it?
That's not what's proposed in the grading plan. If that
Well, we're
were
just talking,
proposed, we
talking
might have-
hypothetically, but, some places they, they'll put a concrete foundation up or whatever, and they can come up to it. I would think the first floor would be a better datum, something like that, but whatever.
I don't think we have an issue here, so.
No, no, I'm
I
just,
don't-
we're
I
talking
don't
about,
think we do. Mr. Chair.
no, we probably should have defined for the future, though.
Victor?
Mr. Chair, looking at this building and how it's gonna tie into the west corner plan, and the look of the building is going to make, the entrance into the town a much better looking place compared to what it is right now in that location. I would like to, move that the planning commission to move the waiver, request as stated.
Second.
And moved by Commissioner Talon, seconded by Commissioner Hannibal, that we approve the waiver request. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes. Those opposed, vote no. The motion carries unanimously, irregardless where the datum point was. Moving on to the next item, which is a site plan presentation for Falcon Point subdivision lot 4. Greg Kraft, applicant. Paul?
Thank you. This site plan, as always, been reviewed in accordance with Section 9, Article 17. Site is located in the Falcon Point subdivision, south of Main Street on Gear Falcon Court. The subject property is zoned limited industrial. The proposal is for development of 4 individual buildings on the 4.2 acre site. The buildings will be office warehouse buildings of approximately 10,200 square feet apiece. Approximately 6.2% of the site is landscaped, and you may notice that's a lot lower than what we typically see. For this particular development, there is a large common detention facility to the north of Gear Falcon that's going to be providing additional landscaping. So part of that subdivision agreement was reduced landscaping on some of these lots. So the landscaping is in conformance with what was proposed with the subdivision. That landscaping will all be clustered as well up at the front where it's visible from Gear Falcon, as well as some trees in the parking lot. The total building coverage is around 23% and 68 parking stalls. The building elevations, there will be 3 to 4 tenant spaces per each building. Metal buildings are proposed with a brick or stone wainscot along the bottom and a peak roof height of approximately 31 feet. As always, this is a presentation for your informational purposes. Any questions, comments, please pass those on at this time.
What is the color theme here, black and white?
Yeah, they're going with the traditional black and white. Tan and dark brown.
Kind of like the black and white myself.
Questions, comments from the commission?
No.
Okay, I think we're good here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. On to the next agenda item, which is community development report. Mr. Ballstaff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Planning Commission. So this is the March 2018 Community Development Report. The formal report is in your packet. This is kind of a slideshow hitting some of the highlights. Got to give credit to Paul and the other staff members. Paul generally assembles the report itself with some assistance from the other staff. And then this is just hitting some of the highlights that are at the forefront at this point in time. Not to say that any of the other projects in the report aren't as important. It's just for, in the interest of brevity, we hit the highlights tonight. So the East Point Plaza, I think you just saw at the last meeting. That's the upper right photograph or simulation. That's the strip center in the East Point subdivision with Doug's Day Diner. I've got Arby's shown here on Crossroads Boulevard and Burger King in the bullet list. And then you also just saw the Good Samaritan Assisted Living Memory Care Facility at the last meeting. So those are the ones that are under review, and you've just seen the presentations. The ones that are under construction, coming out of the ground, some of the bigger ones right now, are the South Hill 6th filing. That's that's the most recent multifamily at the top of Crossroads and 7th. We had the 2 South Hill 4th and 5th apartments that were the Journey Homes project. The 6th filing is now the age-restricted product that's further to the west. Highland Meadows Golf Course 12th filing is the top photo here. Some more townhomes and condos in both the 11th and 12th filing continue to go up. Fuzzy's Taco Shop, if you've been at Crossroads and Fairgrounds Avenue, they've got their foundation or their footings in, and they are actually going to Board of Adjustment this month to get their sign approved, but otherwise that's underway. Marriott Spring Hill Suites is the middle picture here. That's coming right along. And then obviously Dutch Brothers Coffee across from the middle school, Brand's Liquor next to Fuzzy's. These are all some of the projects, not all of them, that are going on. So we've got a lot coming out of the ground right now. The infrastructure that you see underway, East Point subdivision, where that Doug's Day Diner and the Strip Center is going, that we've also just, I believe, issued the permit for Human Bean, and Come and Go, is, that you'll recall, is under review as well from a building permit standpoint. So all of those will be under construction at the same time that the roundabout on 257 is under construction here in the near future. Rain Dance, second filing and third filing. That's the bottom photo. If you've been on New Liberty Road over the top of the hill lately, you've seen that they've got the infrastructure going in all over that site. So it's really transforming that property overnight almost. Then the Ridge of Harmony Road second filing is the north side of Harmony Road and County Line Road. They are also nearing the point of infrastructure putting in the ground. Residential building permit activity, the first 2 months of this year, we had 67 new single-family home permits, so that is still a strong number. It's on pace, just a little behind the pace of the last 2 years, but still on record, or on the pace for the third highest total in Windsor history. So the leaders in that single-family category in the first 2 months were the Ridge at Harmony Road, Winshire Park, Bruner Farm, 10th filing. That is, the Bruner Farm 10th filing, if you might not recall, is the far east end of Grand Avenue in the New Windsor subdivision. There's a park site and some new lots, 10 new lots in that area. Single-family building permit comparison to past years. So through February, again, we're on the third fastest pace in town history. The previous record was in, before the last 2 years, we had 2000 and 2005 were the previous record. Multifamily projects are again strong this year. We're actually ahead of last year's pace. These are the projects, some of them are the usual suspects, like Lighthouse, Highland Meadows Golf Course 11th and 12th filing, and the South Hill 6th filing that was just mentioned. But we've also got some apartments, townhomes going up in Grasslands Park, just north of the railroad tracks, north of the fire department. And then also the Eagle Cross, the projects that are pending final approval but are nearing that stage are the Eagle Crossing 4th filing that we just saw tonight, the Schutz third filing, that's at the northwest corner of County Road 30, Larimer County Road 30 and Fairgrounds Avenue. So just northwest of the Highland Meadows Golf Course. And then Chimney Park fourth filing, you saw the preliminary approval over just between Chimney Park and Windsor Auto Repair. So the multifamily permits through February, again, last year was the record pace, and we're already ahead of last year, so strong pace, and that also, again, it goes towards our comprehensive plan goal of diversifying our housing stock to serve a broader needs base. So looking at the residential lot inventory, since we've been tracking that a little bit more, given all the permits that we've been pulling for the past several years, the number varies as far as the inventory goes between 500 and 800. And at the end of February, we were right in that same window with 688. So this is how the inventory has looked at the end of each year. And for the past several years, we've been in that 500 to 800 range. Regional comparison, this one really got to give a shout out to Severance for their building activity. If you normally we have led this category for several years, but single family permits, Severance has issued 145 permits the first 2 months of this year. So that's it's interesting to watch this chart as we've come out of over the last several years since the recession. The number of permits in the large communities has settled to the bottom, and the smaller communities and mid-sized communities like ourselves have picked up that slack. And then multifamily, we're in there with Fort Collins and Loveland in terms of permits for new multifamily. So, and that's it.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Good information.
Yeah.
All right.
Anybody have any questions for Scott?
What we got to, that's right.
I'm just wondering, I think in the past, as far as having a diversity of housing choices, we were certainly underserved for multifamily, you know, maybe even 2.5, 3 years ago. And it feels like the pendulum's swinging the other way now that maybe we're getting a little heavy on multifamily. Do you have a sense for what that balance should be, or what it's going to be after everything's built out? Are we, compared to other communities, how are we sitting for that goal of having good diversity?
Well, I guess that's a good question, and it's something that we probably need to look into a little bit. But I think Windsor has historically been so limited in multifamily that we're still not there yet in terms of striking a balance. But we are starting to move in that direction, and it's something that we probably need to look at. I think as our greenfield subdivisions are becoming master planned and include certain pods of multifamily development, that'll probably be firmed up as projects like Rain Dance and the Ridge and Harmony Road. Once we have the master plans in place, we'll be able to gauge that a little bit better. But yeah, right now I think we're still playing a little bit of catch up, but it's something that we should look at, is what is that perfect balance.
Right.
Mr. Chair.
Jerry, you had a question?
How many building permits did we end up with last year? Total?
516 single-family homes, and I don't recall the number. 400 units of multifamily.
That's a little
So-
lower than the year before, correct?
No, the multifamily units was the all-time high last year.
Single
So I
family?
think if you combine the two, it was 900, a little over 900 dwelling units last year. And if you take that times the roughly 2.7 persons per household, that'll give you the population growth for last year, slightly less than 2,000, I believe, but, so.
Interesting. Victor, you had a question?
Yeah, just off of Commissioner Annabelle's concern about, the multifamily. The other thing I was looking at is with the multifamily and residential, how are we looking in your mind, how are we looking in comparison with, that in comparison with our commercial? Are we balancing, or are we behind on our commercial side? Because the commercial is what powers everything that goes on.
Right. No, I think our economic development department would love to have more commercial development, industrial development, just more employment in general. And I know that they're actively recruiting the things that we constantly see in our community surveys as far as sit-down restaurants and things like that, that you can stay in Windsor and not have to go to the surrounding communities. I think we're probably somewhat we're seeing more commercial site plans like you've seen on your most recent agendas, several different restaurants, hotels, and those types of things that are in the medical facility tonight. You're seeing some of that. It's probably still playing catch up like multifamily is as well. You know, we had so many good years of steady single-family detached home development in the 90s and early 2000s that once we hit certain thresholds in population, then different businesses start looking at Windsor and
Charles?
I know this is a difficult metric to turn around project reviews. It's kind of the ultimate is, are you staffed correctly? You know, are you achieving your goals for turning around reviews to potential developers?
I would say right now we're at the outside end of the spectrum in terms of, you know, we always used to say 30 to 45 days for the first round of review, and then it's in their park, so it's hard to, however long it takes them to turn around corrections, but we're probably more in the 45 to 60 or a little bit further out right now, just due to the workload. I know that Paul and Melissa and Carlin all have numerous night meetings with neighborhood meetings in addition to planning commission and public hearings, so, or planning commission, town board. So, you know, I think that is something that we'll be proposing in the 2019 budget to probably look at some of the staffing challenges that we're facing right now. One of the things that I know is kind of taken a back seat, not completely on staff's, not because of staffing wholly, but also because of consultant challenges, is the code update that we've been kind of, it's been in a stalled pattern here recently, and we are working with the consultant to get that back on track, but we expect it to probably extend through the summer now instead of, we were shooting to have it done before the election so that we wouldn't have two different boards having to play catch up. But I think it may work out in the long term to work on it through the summer so we can have adequate work sessions with stakeholders, the development community, and everybody. But yeah, staffing is a challenge right now just from the workload.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about burnout, you know, with the number of projects, night meetings, you know.
Do we look burned out?
Well, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
if they're not having night meetings, they're just wasting 6-7 hours a night sleeping.
No, I appreciate that, and I'm sure the town board will be discussing that during budget considerations. So.
Yeah, you know, how to bring in contract help, you know, there's,
Yeah, we're always looking.
I'll let you figure that out, but with this big of a load, with so unique projects, it takes more time
Right.
to go through it, and it's just kind of another log on top of the, or another straw on the camel's back, as it were.
Yeah, we're always looking at different opportunities to use contract staff as well, and there will probably be some of that discussion in this budget cycle as well. We're already, as you all know, we're using Safe Built for our contract building department, and we're pulling in probably one of their staff members to help us in the customer service department with building permit issuance. With the turnover, I'm sure you've probably seen the recent, that our town clerk of 9 years is leaving us to go to City of Loveland, which we'll miss her dearly, and so will her department. There'll be some new staff members learning the building permit process down there. And so we're bringing in some safe build contract help to assist there, and anywhere we can take advantage of that, we will. And I wanted to also point out, I got some information late today. I didn't have a chance to go over it, but we'll be talking more about the questions about contract services and building services and contractor licensing in the near future as well.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions?
The code update, does it go through the parking issue that we discussed today and any other large multifamily complexes? Since we're new to that, does the code update address those pretty well?
Yeah, that is definitely one area that we'll be looking at.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay, thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Communication from Planning Commission. Tim, anything?
No, sir.
Nothing.
Nope.
Jared?
Nope,
Mr. Dallin?
no communication.
Charles?
I'm good.
Doug? Town Board Liaison. Ken?
Yes, sir. A couple of things. Question about multifamily housing. That's been an objective of the town board, is to have more diverse housing in our community, which leads to the next question of affordability. And that's something we still don't know. Some of these apartments are going to be renting for as much as $2,000 a month. And I think you asked a question about market price on some of the townhomes. The answer is always what the market is. And I was in an earlier meeting this afternoon with 2 other Northern Colorado communities addressing the same thing, affordability. So that's still a question, but it's definitely a good move for our community to have more diverse housing. That's really a positive thing for us. And so we'll see how the affordability kind of shakes out here. There's a lot of factors involved in that. Your question too is really significant about the balance between residential and commercial. The theory is that rooftops leads to more commercial. And on the board, we're looking at the next 10, sometimes 20 years on roadway. And we know that there's a shortage in funding for that. We're looking at water needs over the next 10 years, and that's can actually give you a heartburn. Okay, it's just a challenge. We're going to have to figure out how to pay for water. Even if we shut the doors to growth, our water costs are going to be going up. So as we look at all those things, I see a real need for more commercial, so we have a sales tax base to help pay for some of the things, amenities we already have and things that we're going to need the next 10, 20 years. So good point there on the questions, I think. And in our interviews and looking for a new town manager, the administrative structure is one of the things we're really questioning them about. And one of the tasks that Shane Hill, our new town manager, will have early on is to look at where we are. We're a community of 30,000 now. Where are we? Where are we going? What's the proper administrative structure, which includes proper levels of staffing and some things you've asked about contract service and how much in-house. So as we've grown, that's our next steps. So that's what we're working on.
Interesting. Victor?
No.
Oh, legit question
I forgot.
here. Communication from staff. Paul, you have anything?
No, I think you're probably tired of hearing from me, so.
Scott?
I just have one item. It's a City of Greeley referral that we received, and we didn't get it in time to get it on tonight's agenda, but it's a Greeley referral for expansion of Vestas's outside storage of blades. So this is on the east side of the Vestas property is where Windsor's city limits coincide with Greeley's. So all the blade storage on the agricultural ground on the east side of the site is in Greeley. They're proposing to expand that to the north up to Weld County Road 64 3/4, which is the road with the 2 sharp 90-degree turn curves. So we've put together some comments that I just wanted to run by you real quick so that they want their referral comments back by tomorrow. So the comments that we put together is, one is just traffic in general on 64 3/4 has increased dramatically with the cumulative effect of employees commuting between Greeley and Windsor and other land use approvals such as the Martin Marietta truck traffic. So it's all contributed to the increased traffic, and Windsor's 2017 roadway improvement plan indicates that the existing ADT, or average daily traffic volume, of 2,700 on Weld County Road 64 3/4 at the Vestas site, and it forecasts 7,400 ADT by 2040. So ideally, we would recommend that a traffic study be implemented in conjunction with any expanded use of the property. Then also, at a minimum, we would recommend that they require adequate right-of-way for County Road 64 3/4 be dedicated for the flattening of those curves, similar, so that they would match the curves at Owens, Illinois, OI further to the west. That may be a right-of-way reservation so that they could use the area until the road gets improved, but just to get the right-of-way and make sure they don't landscape in the future right-of-way. Then also, the existing access points are more or less existing agricultural access points. So we'd ask them to take a look at the access, make sure that adequate tracking pads and things like that so that mud isn't being tracked onto the street. The proposed landscaping associated with the perimeter of the site will require additional water, so we just are asking the question, where's that water for irrigation coming from? Obviously, if they're continuing Windsor lines into Greeley or vice versa, need to make sure that the adequate raw water is dedicated. And then lastly, just recommending that they mitigate any negative impacts on the neighboring property owners. There are a couple of neighboring residences to the east that I'm sure would appreciate dust mitigation and that kind of thing. So those are the comments that we intend to put in that letter, and unless the planning commission has anything to add or questions.
I think you have it covered.
Okay.
On the traffic study, I'm wondering how long those traffic studies are really good for. I just happened to be on the Greeley Planning Commission for that project on the Greeley side of the parking, and I remember we did a traffic study for it. And I don't know, that might be too old to be useful anymore, but I don't know if that data is of use that another traffic study needs to be done or not.
Was it completed for the Vestas property?
I believe so. I mean, it's been a few years, so I'm not sure, but I'd check.
No, that's a good point. If a traffic study was done originally, even if it was 5 or 6 years ago or more, then it may be more of a simple traffic update letter that the engineer just updates some of the information in the study. So it's good information. Thanks. That's all I had.
Is that all you had, Scott?
That's all I had.
Okay. Amanda, you have anything? Just glad to be here, Ray.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned.